I thought you might want to see this.
Where did you find this photograph?
The sound came first. A single flutter, lighter than breath. A small photograph had slipped from the hand of power and landed face down on the marble floor. Inside La Méridienne, every movement was rehearsed. The soft hum of a cello track, the steady rhythm of cutlery, the whispered code of wealth. At table 1 sat Cole Vance, billionaire and darling of the business press. To the public, he was a man who built empires and donated generously. In truth, even his stillness felt like a command. Across the room, a waitress noticed the fall. She moved quietly. Years of service had taught her how to glide between tables without leaving a trace. The small square of paper lay half hidden beneath the tablecloth, as if the floor itself wanted to keep it secret. She bent down. A Polaroid, old and creased. On its surface, a young girl smiled at the camera, wearing a public school uniform. Behind her, a wire fence caught bits of sunlight. The photo didn't belong here, among crystal glasses and imported candles. It looked like something carried too long in a wallet. Too close to the heart, the waitress hesitated, then crossed to the man who had dropped it. "Sir," she said quietly. "You dropped this." Cole Vance turned, the picture of composure until his eyes found the photo. For a moment his expression broke. The mask slipped. The hum of conversation around him went on, oblivious. But his world seemed to stop. He stared at the image as if it had spoken. His hand hovered over it but did not touch. "Where did you find that?" he asked, voice low, stripped of authority. "By your chair," she replied. He finally reached out, taking the Polaroid as though it might cut him. He folded it once, then again, slow and deliberate. When he slipped it into his inner pocket, his fingers trembled before they straightened his cufflink. "Thank you," he said, the words tight, mechanical. The waitress nodded and stepped back. But she couldn't look away. The man who commanded cities now looked smaller, cornered by something invisible. She caught the faint quiver of his jaw before he rose and walked out, leaving behind an untouched glass of water and the faint scent of cedar cologne. The doors closed behind him. Silence returned like a held breath released. The manager approached, muttering about tips, about how clients like Vance kept the lights on. He left a white envelope, generous, meant to erase curiosity. But the waitress didn't open it. She looked instead at the space he'd occupied, at the faint circle his glass had left on the linen. That small ring seemed to glow under the chandelier, a mark of something heavy passing through. She gathered the dishes slowly, her thoughts circling back to the photograph. The girl's smile had been wide, unguarded, a kind of pride that didn't belong to money. And the man who'd dropped it, what had that smile reminded him of? She caught her reflection in the polished window. Tired eyes, straight posture, a uniform built for invisibility. Outside, the city pulsed with lights from offices he probably owned. Still, she had seen him falter. Just once. When the shift ended, she untied her apron and stepped into the night air. The sound of rain on pavement seemed sharper than usual, each drop like a question she couldn't answer. She didn't know whose face lived inside that photo, or why it had shaken him, but she knew she'd touched something sacred, or perhaps forbidden. The night exhaled slowly, like a stage after the curtain falls. By midnight, the Meridian stood half-lit, its chandeliers fading to tired gold. The smell of lemon cleaner and cooled wine replaced the perfume of money. Laughter was gone. Only the echoes remained. In the dining room, a waitress cleared the last table. Her motions were quiet, almost reverent. Plate, glass, cloth, repeat. Around her, the staff whispered about tips and VIPs, about who smiled at whom and who didn't bother. "Did you see how much the man in the corner left?" someone said near the bar. "Enough to pay my rent," another replied. "Some people's loose change is our miracle." The waitress didn't join in. Her hands paused mid-motion. She could still see it. The photo on the marble floor, the man's reaction. Billionaire Cole Vance, undone by something small enough to fit in a wallet. The image replayed behind her eyes. The shock, the silence, the way his breath caught before he folded the photo as if it were fragile glass. She told herself it was nothing. A dropped picture. A stranger's secret. The kind of thing you forget after a long shift. But forgetting proved harder than cleaning. In the kitchen, the dishwashers sang softly over the hiss of steam, their voices echoing in tiled walls. The manager sat in his office counting tips under fluorescent light, his face a mixture of weariness and control. The waitress moved through the empty dining room. Only one mark remained where Cole Vance had sat, a faint ring from a glass like the ghost of a moon. She wiped it once, then stopped. For reasons she couldn't explain, she let it stay. Above the bar hung a wall of framed photographs, famous faces caught in perfect smiles. There he was, Cole Vance, shaking hands with a senator, his grin polished, his suit spotless. The man in the picture looked untouchable, but tonight she had seen the truth, a fracture beneath the shine. Who was the girl in that photo? A daughter? Someone he'd lost? Or something he wished he could forget? The restaurant fell into its closing rhythm. Chairs stacked, lights dimmed, candles pinched out one by one. Each sound, broom against marble, faucet drip, rustle of cloth, felt like a heartbeat counting down to silence. For her, this was the honest part of the night. No guests, no rehearsed politeness. Just the workers who made beauty for others and vanished before dawn. The contrast was always sharp. Gold upstairs, sweat below. She finished folding her apron, but her mind lingered on that tiny photograph. It didn't belong in this world of power and polish. It belonged somewhere human. Outside, rain began to fall, steady, silver, cleansing. She stood by the window a moment longer, watching droplets race down the glass. Her reflection blurred in the pain as if the night itself was erasing her. Finally, she stepped into the rain, coat pulled tight, the memory tucked somewhere she couldn't name. She didn't know it yet. But what she remembered tonight would soon become dangerous to remember at all. The morning broke like a headline. Every screen in the city carried his face. Cole Vance, smiling beneath the bright letters. Vance Industries launches new youth initiative. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, and words like visionary and humanitarian drifted through the air like confetti. Cole stood at the podium, framed by banners of blue and gold. Behind him, the slogan read, "Building Tomorrow Together." His voice was calm, rehearsed, perfect. Every child, he said, deserves opportunity. That's why our foundation is committing $10 million to educational programs across the nation. Applause filled the room, warm, automatic. The journalists scribbled, the photographers clicked. He knew how to time his pauses, how to smile just enough to look human but not enough to seem weak. Yet beneath the polished surface, his thoughts were not on the cameras. They were on her. The photo. The little girl in the school uniform, the sunlight through the fence, and the name scrawled in fading ink on the back, Nia. He had unfolded that Polaroid 3 times before dawn, each time slower than before. It had felt almost alive, as if the paper breathed when he touched it. The handwriting was small, uneven. He had stared at the 4 letters until they blurred. Nia. The name echoed through the speech behind every practiced phrase. Each time he said, "the children," he saw her face. Each time the crowd clapped, he felt smaller inside. When the press conference ended, aides surrounded him. Praise, handshakes, flashes of teeth. Someone handed him a tablet showing live coverage. His own image smiled back, standing under a banner of hope. He forced a nod. "Good coverage," he said, but his pulse betrayed him. The applause outside faded into a low hum that wouldn't stop. Back in his car, the driver opened the door, but Cole didn't move. Through the tinted window, the world looked distant, flattened. His reflection floated faintly on the glass. Expensive suit, tired eyes. The mirror image of a man who built walls out of reputation. He took the photo from his pocket again. The edges were warm now, as if they remembered his hand. For a moment, he wanted to believe it was just guilt, something that would pass with time. But guilt has shape. "This was sharper, sir." His assistant's voice broke through. "We have the board meeting in 20 minutes. He folded the photo carefully and slipped it back into his jacket. "Let's go," he said. At the office, the top floor gleamed with glass and quiet. Awards lined the wall, frames, plaques, a lifetime of applause frozen in metal. Cole stood before them, staring at his own name repeated again and again. It all looked so clean, so empty. He remembered when the photo was taken. The faint smell of chalk and rain, the laugh of a child who didn't yet know what promises could break. He closed his eyes. The room felt smaller. By afternoon, the company's public relations team had turned his speech into a viral campaign. His inbox overflowed with praise, remarkable leadership, inspiring generosity. Even the mayor had called to congratulate him. But when the sun set, Cole Vance sat alone in his office. Lights dim, tie undone. The city glowed below him, his empire alive and shining. He opened the photo one last time. The crease through the middle cut the child's smile in half. He touched the folded line gently, as if it were a wound he couldn't heal. Outside, the headlines praised a savior. Inside, the man behind them stared at proof of the truth he had buried. The contrast between his spotless image and the secret it hid had become unbearable. The next morning, the air inside La Méridien felt heavier than usual. The tables gleamed. The chandeliers glowed, but something unseen had shifted, like a silence waiting to speak. At noon, a man in a gray suit walked in. He wasn't a diner. His shoes made no sound on the marble, yet every step drew eyes. He carried a leather folder and the faint smell of rain. The hostess smiled out of habit, but her voice faltered when he flashed a silver badge. "Vance Industries," he said simply. "Here to follow up on last night's visit." The staff froze, exchanging quick glances. Everyone knew which visit he meant. The manager appeared almost instantly. Nervous smile, steady hands. He ushered the man toward his office near the back. Their voices stayed low, muffled through the glass wall. But tension leaked into the room like a draft. The waitress was polishing silverware when the manager called her name. "He just has a few questions," he said. His tone was soft, but his eyes warned her to tread carefully. The investigator gestured toward a chair. "You served Mr. Vance last night?" Yes, he studied her, not her words. "Did anything unusual happen?" She hesitated. He dropped something. "I gave it back. What was it?" "A photo." He wrote it down, slow, deliberate. "You look at it?" She nodded once, only to see what it was. He leaned forward. "What was on it?" Her throat tightened. The memory flashed. The girl, the fence, the proud smile. She chose her words carefully. A child. A school uniform? That's all. The man's pen stopped moving. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "You tell anyone else?" "No." He studied her again, weighing the truth in her tone. Then he closed his folder. "Good. Let's keep it that way." Before she could reply, the manager stepped in. "Of course," he said quickly. "We respect our guests' privacy." The investigator nodded once, slipped his badge away, and left as quietly as he came. The sound of the door closing felt final. When he was gone, the manager exhaled. "Don't get involved," he murmured. "It's just business." She looked at him, uncertain. But he asked about a photo. "Why would—" He cut her off with a practiced smile. "Some things above our pay grade." "Understand?" She did, but she didn't agree. As she cleared the counter, her reflection stared back from the polished metal. Steady eyes, calm face. Yet beneath that calm, questions burned. Why send someone to erase a moment so small? Why protect a man from the truth of his own past? The lunch crowd began to arrive, all bright voices and easy laughter. The restaurant came alive again, pretending nothing had happened. But she knew better now. Truth, she thought, was not always welcome in polished rooms. It didn't shine. It scratched the surface, and once it did, the reflection never looked the same again. The memory returned like a photograph dropped in water. Soft at first, then sharp enough to cut. Years peeled back in Cole Vance's mind, and the world shifted to another time. The boardrooms, the polished speeches, the cameras, none of it existed yet. There was only a small office, a single desk lamp, and the sound of rain against the window. She had worked for him then. Lila, quiet, capable, the kind of employee people overlooked until the company needed saving. She carried calm with her, the way some people carry perfume. Her laughter had been rare, but when it came, the room changed color. He remembered the afternoon she came to him, eyes steady, voice trembling only once. "Cole," she had said, "I need to tell you something." The words that followed rearranged his future. A child, his child. For one long moment he had said nothing. He'd built his young empire on control, on precision, on being the man no one could surprise. But her honesty cracked that armor. He remembered reaching for the edge of his desk just to steady himself. The days that followed blurred together. Meetings, whispers, phone calls. His legal team moved faster than his conscience. They drew up agreements, silenced rumors, and locked everything behind signatures and sealed envelopes. Discretion protects everyone, one lawyer had told him, including her. He had nodded then. But deep down, he knew who that protection was for. Lila disappeared a month later. He sent money, enough to buy distance. The company grew, his name spread, and his public image solidified into something larger than truth. Reporters praised his discipline. Investors called him a genius. But that photo was taken before the silence. He remembered the day it was captured. A school courtyard, warm sunlight, the sound of children shouting over one another. Lila had sent it to him once, folded inside a letter. "She started school today," the note read. "Her name's Nia. She's proud." He never wrote back. He had kept the Polaroid in a drawer for years, convincing himself it was proof that he cared. Later, when the scandals came for other men in his circle, he'd burned old letters, deleted files, erased trails. But somehow the photo survived, tucked behind a certificate in his study, small enough to forget, powerful enough to haunt. Now, decades later, that same image stared at him from his desk. The girl behind the fence, sunlight on her face, 4 letters written in a child's hand. Nia. He wondered where she was now, whether she knew the truth, whether she'd grown up thinking he was a stranger or worse, a coward who left. The weight in his chest tightened. Every building he owned, every dollar he'd earned, had been built atop one unspoken lie. Silence had been his foundation, and success its cover. He reached for the photograph again. The crease through the middle ran straight through Nia's smile. He pressed a hand over it, as if he could mend it by touch. But the truth doesn't mend. It only waits. In the quiet of his office, surrounded by trophies of ambition, Cole understood what his fortune truly cost. It wasn't just time or effort, it was a voice. Lila's voice. A child's name. A story he had paid to forget. Now, it was all he could remember. His wealth, he realized, had not only been built on deals, but on silences. The invitation came written on heavy cream paper, sealed in gold. It arrived folded inside a plain envelope, as if importance needed disguise. The message was short. "Mr. Vance requests your presence this evening." A brief conversation, a misunderstanding to clarify. The waitress stared at it for a long time before agreeing. Curiosity had become heavier than caution. By dusk, La Meridian looked the same as before. Lights warm, air still, a stage reset for another performance. But tonight, the tables were empty except for one, the same corner where the photograph had fallen. He was already there when she entered. Cole Vance, immaculate as always, yet smaller somehow, like a statue placed under dimmer light. "Thank you for coming," he said. His tone was polite, but it carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. She nodded, taking the seat across from him. Between them sat a single candle, its flame bending slightly toward her as if drawn by truth. "I'm told there was some confusion," he began. "A photo went missing, perhaps seen by mistake. I want to ensure there are no misinterpretations." She didn't answer right away. The quiet stretched, thick with unspoken questions. Finally, she reached into her pocket and placed the Polaroid on the table. The edges were worn, the crease still cutting through the little girl's smile. "You left this," she said simply. He looked at it, but his eyes refused to settle on the image. His fingers tightened around his glass. "You kept it." "I found it," she corrected. "There's a difference," his jaw flexed. "You understand that picture is private. It means nothing, at least not in the way you might think." She tilted her head, studying him. The candlelight flickered across his face, revealing fatigue that money couldn't hide. "It must mean something," she said quietly. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost." He tried to smile, but it came out hollow. "Some ghosts are better left alone." She slid the photo closer to him, the motion slow and deliberate. "She looks proud," she said. "Whoever she is." The words hung between them, soft, but they landed like a truth too heavy to ignore. He reached out. His hand hovered, trembled slightly, then closed around the picture. When his eyes finally met hers, there was no arrogance left, only a man cornered by what he once buried. "Thank you," he murmured. It wasn't gratitude. It was surrender. She stood, sensing the conversation was over. No promises, no accusations, only the quiet collapse of a wall that had stood for years. As she turned to leave, the restaurant lights dimmed further, and the single candle flickered out. The faint scent of smoke curled between them like a closing curtain. Cole stayed seated long after she was gone. In the hush of the empty room, he unfolded the Polaroid again. The girl's smile stared up at him, unchanged, unbought. His fingers shook. The photo trembled. He could not look at it without trembling too. It began with a single headline, by morning. It had become a storm. Screens across the city flashed the same words. Whistleblower leaks internal files from Vance Industries. Beneath the headline ran a list of accusations, hidden settlements, silenced employees, and one small buried story about a woman named Lila Davis. Cole Vance sat in his office as his empire caught fire. The skyline beyond the window shimmered with sunlight, cruel in its calm. On his desk, his phone vibrated nonstop. Calls from lawyers, messages from board members, alerts from public relations. "Sir, we need to issue a statement immediately," said his chief counsel, voice tight. "Deny the false claims? Call it defamation." Cole didn't answer. He stared instead at the printed article on his screen. It was all there. The payments, the years of silence, and one blurred image of a child behind a fence, lifted from an old company file. The caption read, "Rumored to be connected to an unacknowledged family matter." The world was connecting the dots he had spent decades erasing. "Mr. Vance," the counsel pressed, "if we move fast, we can still control the story." Cole's eyes drifted to the photo lying face down beside his keyboard. The same Polaroid the waitress had returned to him days ago. The same photo he once treated like contraband. He turned it over. The girl's smile looked brighter in daylight, defiant against the gray walls of his office. Her name, written in fading pen, Nia, seemed to stare back at him. Control. That was the word he had lived by. He built his empire on it, defended it, worshipped it. And yet, here it was. Crumbling in public view, undone by truth he'd paid to hide. Outside his office, reporters gathered in the lobby. Cameras waited, their lenses like judgment. The company's glass doors reflected the frenzy. Microphones, flashes, questions. "Cole Vance," one voice shouted through the chaos. "Did you cover up payments related to an employee's child?" He closed his eyes. The question struck like a bell, echoing through the hallways of his conscience. His assistant appeared at the doorway, pale and shaking. "Sir, they're asking for you downstairs. The board wants direction now." He rose slowly, the photo still in his hand. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt exposed and strangely free. "What are you going to tell them?" she asked. He looked down at Nia's face one last time. The sunlight hit the photo just right, turning its small crease into a line of light. "The truth," he said quietly. "All of it." He slipped the Polaroid into his jacket pocket, not as evidence to hide, but as proof of what he could no longer deny. When he stepped into the hallway, cameras flashed like lightning, swallowing him whole. The same photo that once shamed him had become the one thing that demanded he finally speak. The cameras waited like mirrors that refused to lie. Cole Vance stood behind the podium, the same stage where he had once announced triumphs and donations. But this time no banners hung behind him, no logos, no slogans, only a plain white wall, empty, honest, unbranded. The crowd before him was a sea of lights and lenses, reporters, employees, citizens. The sound of whispers filled the air like static. For hours the world had speculated. Now they wanted answers. He gripped the sides of the podium. His hands were steady, but his voice, when it came, carried a tremor that wasn't fear. It was truth forcing its way through years of silence. "I have spent my life trying to build things that would last," he began. "Companies, wealth, reputation, but I built them on a foundation I knew was cracked." The room stilled. No one wrote. No one coughed. He took a breath. "Many years ago, I wronged someone who trusted me. A young woman named Lila Davis. She worked for me when I was starting out. When she told me she was expecting a child, I chose fear over decency. I let others bury the story, and I let her disappear." He paused. The words hung heavy in the air. "That child's name," he continued, voice quiet but firm, "was Nia. She is my daughter." Cameras clicked, flashes ignited, but Cole didn't flinch. "I have never met her. I have no right to ask forgiveness from her or from her mother. But hiding this truth has cost me more than money could ever earn back. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the Polaroid. Its edges were creased, its colors fading, but the little girl's smile shone as if untouched by time. He held it up, letting the world see what he had once tried to erase. "This," he said softly, "is the reason I'm standing here." A simple photograph, handed back to me by a woman who reminded me what honesty looks like. He didn't name the waitress, but his words carried the weight of gratitude. She could have looked away, pretended not to see. Instead, she reminded me that dignity isn't earned by power. It's earned by truth. The silence in the room deepened until it became almost sacred. Even the cameras seemed to lower slightly, as if the moment required respect. Cole drew in one last breath. I've spoken from many stages in my life. Every time before this, my words were rehearsed, polished, safe, but not today. Today, I have no speechwriter, no defense, no spin. He looked out at the crowd, not as a CEO, but as a man stripped of armor. For the first time, I'm speaking without a script. He set the photo gently on the podium, its small weight anchoring his confession. If this costs me everything I built, he said, then maybe it finally builds something worth keeping. The flashes resumed, slower now, quieter. Not hunting scandal, but recording something rare. Cole stepped back from the microphone, his head bowed slightly, not in shame, but in release. In the reflection of the cameras, the man who once hid behind power now stood unmasked, his truth no longer buried, his voice finally his own. For the first time, he spoke without a script. The morning light arrived without ceremony, soft, pale, and unbothered by what the world had learned overnight. At La Meridienne, the scent of brewed coffee replaced the perfume of last night's panic. Staff spoke in hushed voices, glancing at the mounted TV above the bar. The news anchor's voice filled the quiet space. In a stunning turn, billionaire Cole Vance publicly admitted to concealing the existence of his daughter. Nia Davis, the confession, streamed worldwide, has already reshaped the public image of one of America's most powerful executives. Every face turned toward the screen, every word pressed into the air like a lesson. The waitress, who had once bent to pick up a photograph, moved quietly between tables, straightening silverware that no one had touched. The rhythm of her work hadn't changed, but something inside her had. The cameras showed clips from the night before. Vance at the podium, his voice steady, the Polaroid resting beside him. The same photo she had once handed back in silence now appeared on every news channel, magnified and dissected. What had once been private guilt had become public truth. Her co-worker whispered, "He actually said her name, Naya, said he was sorry." The waitress nodded but said nothing. She wasn't sure what to call what she felt. Not pride, not shock. Something quieter, like watching a locked door finally open. The manager approached, softer than usual. "You see the news?" "Yes," he hesitated, searching for words. "Guess you were part of something bigger than you knew." She smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything." "Sometimes," he said, "not looking away is doing something." Outside, the day moved on. Cars passed. Sunlight glittered off glass towers, the same towers Cole Vance had built. But they seemed smaller now, like reflections of something human instead of untouchable. The lunch crowd arrived slowly, subdued. Even the regulars, the kind who never stopped talking about business, spoke softer today. Between orders, fragments of conversation drifted through the air. Truth, redemption, second chances. In the kitchen, the dishwashers hummed a tune under their breath. The restaurant felt different. Not busier, not richer, but clearer. Like the air after a storm. When her shift ended, the waitress untied her apron and stepped outside. Across the street, a newsstand displayed the morning paper. The front page showed Cole Vance standing behind the podium, head slightly bowed, the Polaroid shining under bright lights. The headline read, "The Price of Truth." She bought a copy, folded it neatly, and slipped it into her bag. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. As she walked home, the city sounded less like chaos and more like something finding its rhythm again. Horns, voices, footsteps, all stitched together by a quiet current of renewal. At a red light, she looked up and noticed a billboard showing Vance's face beside a quote from his speech. "Dignity, isn't earned by power. It's earned by truth. She studied it for a moment. The same man who once hid behind money now spoke of honesty. Maybe that was what courage looked like. Not perfection, but the will to stand unmasked. When she reached the corner, a light breeze lifted the edge of a discarded napkin, sending it tumbling across the sidewalk. It reminded her of that first night, the photo, the fall, the silence that followed. She stopped and watched it drift away until it disappeared. Then she whispered almost to herself. Some truths, once lifted from the floor, refused to fall again.